Hello, good evening. We are on day 374, I believe, of the occupation at City Hall. We're taking a little bit of rain cover right now, but we're going to do a little bit of reading right now. This is, let's see, get everything squared away. This is the pamphlet that was released earlier. Was it this week or last week? I can't remember. This is a cover. This is a cover of the pamphlet. This pamphlet it covers specific officers and their instances of deadly force or their incidents of use of force. And before I read from this pamphlet, I do want to say that part of the reason that this pamphlet was made and the goal of this pamphlet was not necessarily for... Hold on. Part of the reason this pamphlet was made is because we still have people in this city, we still have people, politicians in this city, government officials in this city that try to lie and say things like police shootings don't happen here, in custody deaths don't happen here. Oh, there isn't no high rate of use of force, and these issues they're not from Rockford. That's what a lot of the people in power, a lot of these government officials, a lot of these local politicians try to spew out. So this really is just proof of the contrary, proof that use of force is used on a daily basis, proof that deadly force has been used and police officers have been promoted for the use of force. So we're going to be doing a little bit reading, and one more thing, that this is not a situation to where like it's, how many is it? It's 9? I think it's 9 or is it 10? Might be less. My fault. It's 8. My fault. It's 8. It's 8 police officers, and that this covers. This covers 8 different police officers, and this is not a situation to where if you fire these 8 police officers, the problems and issues of police terrorism would be fixed in Rockford. It's an entire culture of impunity. It's an entire system that is embedded with the use of force, that fosters the use of force. So, culture of impunity. This is an introduction. Police terrorism in Winnebago County. A long history of police terrorism exists among the law enforcement agencies in the city of Rockford, Illinois, and in Winnebago County. This terrorism has manifested itself in acts of violence, including, but not limited to, battery, daily excessive force, unjust arrest, false imprisonment, and the murder of citizens within the community. Not once in the more than 50 times that these egregious acts have taken place since 1990 has an officer been found unjustified in their use of force against civilians. On the contrary, multiple police officers have received awards and promotions after having instances of excessive force added to the record. This lack of accountability regarding police terrorism has, over the course of decades, created a culture of impunity in both the Winnebago County Sheriff's Department and the Rockford Police Department. In the aftermath of these heinous actions committed by police, there is a cycle of falsifying official crime scene reports, criminalizing victims through the media, and covering for fellow officers, which directly or indirectly encompass every individual working for these institutions. In the following passages, we have selected 8 officers who are currently employed by either the Winnebago County Sheriff's Department or the Rockford Police Department that have acts of police terrorism documented in their past. We will provide the names of these officers, the ranking of these officers, and the dates of violent acts occurred, and as much as information as possible about the details of the incident. The objective of this pamphlet is to inform the public of the unlawful use of force used against civilians by officers, and how its justification creates a systemic issue of police terrorism in Rockford, Illinois, and in Winnebago County. These are the cops covered. Carla Red, Kurt Wisenhand, Mike Dowkey, Randy Burke, Dominic McNeese, Owen McGinnis, Pete Dalpraw, and Joseph Brulard. Page 5. Name of officer, Carla Red. Years on force, 22 years with the Rockford Police Department. Current rank of officer, Chief of the Rockford Police Department. Date of incidents, January 20th, 2019, and the summer of 2020. Before I read this, I do want to say that we do have copies of this. We do have... I'm trying to think about how many we have. We do have copies of this if anybody want to come by and pick one of these up. And we also have copies of the Winnebago-Boone County Integrity Task Force pamphlet as well. And if you would, or if you prefer an online version, message the page and we can send you a PDF. August 23rd, 2021, Carla Red was promoted. Let me start that over. August 23rd, 2021. Carla Red was promoted to the position of Chief of the Rockford Police Department. Red's meteoric rise as a Rockford Police Department officer can be mostly credited to her willingness to buy into the culture and environment inside the Rockford Police Department. A culture of impunity that encourages, promotes, and necessitates the use of force. On January 20th, 2019, Carla Red was off duty, in plain clothes, parked in the street in front of Living Faith Tabernacle, the church her husband is a pastor of, while she waited outside for her husband. While parked outside, a car would allegedly crash into Red's parked vehicle. After the accident, Red and her husband would open fire on the occupants of the car. The people in the car would get out and run from the car while the shots continued to fire. None of the occupants were armed. Two of the occupants were found minutes later and taken to District 2, the very district Red was in charge of. Police kept them there for several hours before informing him that the charges had been dropped and that they would be releasing him. Red was immediately characterized as a victim of vehicular assault. The Rockford Police Department put out the story of Red's vehicle being smashed and crashed into at a high rate of speed. This point would later be discounted by one of the victims who provided photos of the vehicle. The only significant damage to the car were the bullet holes Red and her husband shot. It wasn't until the shooting was ruled justified that the victims were made aware that that charges would be brought against them. They were subsequently charged with aggravated assault, mob action, obstructing justice, criminal damage to property, and leaving the scene of an accident. In the aftermath of the police attacks on May 30th, 2020, Carla Red was put in charge of the internal investigation into the actions officers took that night. She would state that officers used force, including, but not limited to, grabbing, punching, kicking, deployment of OC, impact weapons, tasers, less lethal shotguns, batons, sponge impact ammunitions, and OC impact ammunition. The result of the internal investigation into the use of force officers took on that night was that their actions were justified under the policy of the Rockford Police Department, which essentially grants officers the ability to do what they feel is appropriate in any given situation. Is there a steady beep? Ah, dang. Might need new batteries. Hold on. Let me see if I got more batteries. left it on. That's a problem. I left it on from this morning. Okay. Let me change out these batteries real quick. Worse. Is that better or worse? Okay. So where are we? Carla Red. Okay. So I want to go back through and read some things. Okay, this specifically this high rate of speed, crashing into a high rate of speed, is a video that has been posted. I'm trying to think of the last time it was shared, but I'll share it again after this video ends. One of the victims, one of the occupants of the vehicle, and they talk about the scene, talk about the incidents. They also provide photos of the car, and it's no damage to that car. It is not. It is no damage to that car at all. If at a high rate of speed, you would think that a high rate of speed is probably something around like, I would even go as low as like 40 miles per hour. If that car was to crash into a parked vehicle going 40 miles per hour, it would not look anything like it did in those photos. So the very nature of things is proven. It's proven at this point that car did not crash into Carla Red's parked vehicle at a so-called high rate of speed. It's proven that it's evidence to the contrary of that. And they were charged with, let's go over these charges. They were charged with aggravated assault, mob action, obstructing justice, criminal damage to property. Again, the only damage to either of those two cars come from the bullet holes that Carla and her husband shot through. And leaving the scene of an accident. They were charged with leaving the scene of an accident. While their car was being shot up by a police officer, they left. They were charged because they left the car while it was being shot up by a cop. An off-duty cop who never said she was a cop, who was in plain clothes, and this was her personal gun. They got charged with leaving the scene of an accident. A scene that was being shot up. The next officer that's covered is Kurt Whisenhand. 28 years with the Rockford Police Department, and he is currently the Deputy Chief of the Rockford Police Department. The date of the incidents, May 25th, 1997, in the summer of 2020. Let me open this water real quick. Let's see, okay. As a young police officer, Kurt Whisenhand was able to flourish in an environment inside the Rockford Police Department that encourages aggression and the use of force. Now, as a high-ranking commander, he has helped to continue the culture of impunity that officers in Rockford consistently benefit from. What is essential to keep in mind when reviewing the murder of Jimmy Carr is the fact that each individual suspected of committing a crime is supposed to have the right to stand trial. Another thing to keep in mind whenever discussing a situation the police are involved in. My fault. With some lights on, I didn't know if that was for us or not. Okay, we're good. We're good. Okay. Another thing to keep in mind whenever discussing a situation the police are involved in is the fact that police lie. Time and time again, it has been proven that police departments lie in an attempt to win the court of public opinion. And this is something that Kurt Whisenhant has said himself. Kurt Whisenhant, after Denzel Duvant was beaten, is stated on video. It's stated on video that they lie on police reports, that they don't feel the need to tell the truth and put who actually arrested these individuals in their police reports. So it's on record from Kurt Whisenhant that they lie on police reports. On May 25th, 1997, Jimmy Carr and his wife, Tammy, got into an altercation at a holiday party. A friend tried to intervene, which led to the situation becoming deadly. It is unclear what exactly led up to the fatality, but the conclusion was Jimmy Carr had shot and killed the friend. As the police were called, Jimmy fled the scene. Party members would describe the events, and the police began to search the area looking for Jimmy. Kurt Whisenhant would eventually find Jimmy supposedly hiding behind a fence, and the allegations are that Jimmy Carr still had the gun with him. Although the gun was empty. The gun was empty at this point. So at this point, he had a gun, but it was empty. There was no bullets in it at all. Whisenhant allegedly identified himself as a cop, to which Jimmy Carr supposedly began to rise up. As Jimmy was coming up, Whisenhant would shoot and kill Jimmy Carr, shoot him twice in the chest. The situation resulted in Whisenhant going on a paid 3-day leave and then returning to his regular patrol. 3-day leave. He got a 3-day leave for shooting somebody in the chest. Paid 3-day leave off work, paid weekend for shooting somebody in the chest. How do that sound? Just the very nature of that. How do it sound to? How would you feel? How would anybody feel knowing that a police officer that 3 days ago, 4 days ago had just killed somebody, he back on work, no problem. He back to work, no repercussions at all. No repercussions. And as far as the actual scene and the actual incident, the gun was empty for Jimmy Carr, that Jimmy Carr had. Whether or not he even had it on him is a point of the contention. Again, it's a situation where police are on record that they lie in these reports. So, do I fully believe that Jimmy Carr had this gun on him? I'm not sure. There's no proof that Jimmy Carr had this gun on him at the time. And the gun, even if he did have the gun on him, it was empty. And again, we as citizens, we as civilians of Rockford, it is a right to stand trial. We have really no way of knowing, knowing what the circumstances behind Jimmy Carr shooting this individual were. But that didn't matter to Kurt Whisenhant when he acted as a judge and the jury and the executioner of this young man. On May 30th, 2020, the day thousands of community members gathered to march in the streets following the murder of George Floyd, Kurt Whisenhant, then Assistant Deputy Chief, was in charge of District 1, where the march would end. After a small portion, less than a dozen of people, after a small portion, less than a dozen people of the crowd caused some minor damage to windows of the police station, as well as damage to the building sign. The cops had enough in their minds to start attacking. The heinous actions police officers took led to over 100 people being brutalized by the police. And entire neighborhoods were filled with tear gas. Police fired pepper spray bullets into crowds. Police officers brutalized community members and then left their bodies in the field outside District 1. Beat people and left them in piles. People had the cops break their windows of their car as they were yanked out. When questioned that day, Kurt Whisenhand gave the infamous quote, "Sometimes the many have to pay for the sins of the few." No cop faced any repercussions for their brutal attacks that night. The next officer covered is Mike Dalkey. He's been with the Rockford Police Department for 24 years, and he is currently the Assistant Deputy Chief of the Rockford Police Department. Date of incidents, November 13, 2022, and the summer of 2020. Mike Dalkey is currently the longest-serving Assistant Deputy Chief of the Rockford Police Department. Dalkey has stood by as new assistant deputies have taken charge of other districts, and the overall system of policing has remained unchanged. The culture of impunity that is embedded into policing is something that Dalkey has gladly played a hand in. On November 13th, 2002, a 911 was my fault. On December 13th, 2022, a 911 call was made for Tom Klinicki, who was experiencing a seizure. When paramedics responded to the scene, they immediately began to administer aid, despite their attempts of providing care for Tom. Despite their attempts of providing care for Tom, he was still seizing when Mike Dalkey responded to the call. And again, this is a situation where we need to think about it. This is a man having a seizure. What does it need for a police officer to be there in the first place? Why is a police officer's attendance in this situation, why is that required at all? Why is he putting himself in this situation? My fault. The wind is windy over here. Get back to my page. Okay. Upon his arrival, Mike Dalkey approached the scene where paramedics were holding Tom while he was seizing. It is alleged that Tom kicked Dalkey in the groin region, which led to Dalkey punching Tom in the stomach. Again, this is a man having a seizure. And the scene is controlled. It's not like it's a thing where people are attacking the paramedics or anything like that. There's no danger. The only danger that there is in this scene is this young man having a seizure. That's the only danger. That's the only threat in this scene. So, to think that somebody having a seizure, I would think that this person is having a seizure, a cop that don't need to be there at all, put themselves in this situation, and they just so happen to receive a kick from this man during this seizure. And because Mike Dalkey only knows force, because Mike Dalkey has for so long bought into this system of impunity and bought into this system and this culture that necessitates and fosters the use of force, he punches and he beats this man as he's having a seizure. A formal complaint was filed, which launched an internal affairs investigation. The findings of the investigation were Dalkey acted. The findings of the investigation were Dalkey acted in a proper manner, and it's unfortunate that Mr. Klinicki got hurt, but that can happen when presented with a violent situation. This man was having a seizure. That's the only situation that there was. In the summer of 2020, As assistant deputy chief, Dalkey regularly was a cop in charge during the city market protests. He oversaw time and time again unlawful and brutal arrests were made. When he was questioned regarding the cruel and inhumane nature of some of these arrests, specifically the brutalization of black women, Dalkey would attempt to justify these arrests with a dehumanizing quote, "These women are stronger than they look and have a surprisingly high pain tolerance." That's his justification for police officers being beat, young women being beat by 200, 300-pound men, being slammed to the ground by these police officers, being picked up and kicked and slammed and punched. That's the justification for these actions. And I just seen this video today. I seen this video earlier today of an arrest that was made last year during City Market. Where this individual is being pulled to the ground, dragged to the ground, and Mike Dalkey puts his hands on his head, on the back of this young man's head, and slams his head into the ground. I just seen this video earlier today. It was on the, I believe it was the 23 news station had posted this on the coverage from that day. The next officer that we cover is Randy Burke, who's been with the Rockford Police Department for 27 years, and at the time that this was written, he was the interim chief of the Rockford Police Department. The date of incidents include December 21st, 2000, and 2020, all of 2020. After the announcement of Dan O'Shea's retirement, Randy Burke was chosen by the Police and Fire Commission Board to be the interim police chief. Randy Burke is an officer who, for decades, has been a part of the most violent units in the Rockford Police Department. The approval of Randy Burke goes to further enforce the culture of impunity that lies inside the Rockford Police Department. One such incident that highlights this is the shooting of Jonathan Allen. This is an excerpt from a Rockford Register Star article written by Chris Green in 2007. Jonathan Allen, who was 45 at the time, sued members of the Rockford Police Department Tactical Unit, Randy Burke and Jason Bailey. And this tactical unit is sort of the precursor to the scope team. The scope team that we see that almost on a every other day basis, we see them being engaged in some type of police chase, some type of arrest, or something like that. So this is a precursor to the scope team. According to his lawsuit, undercover officers later identified as Randy Burke and Jason Bailey. My fault. I didn't even finish that one. Let me start this over. Jonathan Allen, 45, sued members of the Rockford Police Department Tactical Unit, Randy Burke and Jason Bailey, in 2003 based on a 2000 incident in which he said officers violated his civil rights. According to his lawsuit, undercover officers later identified as Randy Burke and Jason Bailey approached Allen while he was standing near the intersection of 8th Street and 6th Avenue about 2:15 a.m. December 21st, 2000. Allen said police did not identify themselves as officers, and Allen feared for his safety when they approached, so he ran. That's when the two officers fired a total of 8 shots from their guns at the plaintiff, with one of those shots striking the defendant in the lower right leg, causing him to fall to the ground. After being shot, Allen said, 4 officers, without cause or provocation, severely beat the plaintiff on his face, head, left side of his body, causing several contusions, abrasions, and other injuries. Oh, that's another guy. So let's just think about that as in a sense where this was a man that was not dangerous, was not armed, and was just running away. He didn't know. The scope team, I'm not sure how it worked back then, but the scope team today, the precursor, the successor to this tactical unit, are often plainclothes, unmarked cars. So it's not abnormal to think that, or unusual to think that, to see these two men get out of a car, knowing that they are probably in an unmarked car, knowing that they are not in any type of police uniform, to where it's reasonable for this man to be scared of his life. It's reasonable to see, it's reasonable to think that this man should run from this situation, that he might be in danger. And he was in danger. There was no crime that he committed. So to think that these two officers fired a total of 8 shots at him. When you fire a total of 8 shots at him, you're trying to kill him. You are trying to have that man killed. You are trying to murder that young man. There's no, it's not some type of accident that this man lived. My fault. It is an accident that this young man lived. They had full and every intentions to murder this man for doing nothing more than running away as he saw two people approach him. That's it. That's it. And not only did they shoot him, but they ran out on top of him and beat him. That wasn't good enough. That wasn't enough for them. 4 more officers had to come in and beat him too, while he's writhing in pain after being shot. Burke was a high-ranking officer on July 31st, 2020, when the first arrests during the city market protests were made. He oversaw as several individuals were unjustly arrested and brutalized by white vigilantes, Rockford Police Department officers, and Winnebago County Sheriff deputies. Not one officer or citizen that participated in these unlawful arrests faced any repercussions for their assault on protesters and the brutal nature of some of these arrests. In the short amount of time Randy Burke was Assistant Deputy Chief of District 2 for the Rockford Police Department, he authorized and aided in the repeated terrorization of those participating in the occupation at Rockford City Hall. So what this is referring to, I know we got a lot of new people to the page, but I would say in the winter from maybe after we moved out front, so maybe February to March, late March maybe, it was police raids that would happen at 4 o'clock in the morning, where somewhere between 12 to 15 police officers, I think one time was even as much as 20 police officers, would pull up right here to this curb at City Hall. And try to take things that they would call unclaimed property that we could not have storage on the sidewalk. And this is during the middle of winter. So they would be taking things in negative, while the temperatures in the teens, in negative degree weather. They would be taking chairs and blankets and hand warmers and hot chocolate and coffee, and they took bins and boxes full of things. And I believe a few times they would actually go around, they would call the memorials trash. Memorials of people have been killed. Memorials of people have been killed by their co-workers. And they would go around and cut up these memorials. And this only occurred in the short period of time that Randy Burke was the Assistant Deputy Chief of District 2, which is this area. And they stopped when he was promoted. The next officer we cover is Dominic McNeese, who's been with the Rockford Police Department for 8 years and is currently a scope team member with the Rockford Police Department. Date of incidents include October 2nd, 2020, January 5th, 2021. Dominic McNeese is the latest cop who is currently benefiting from the culture of impunity. McNeese has shown eagerness and willingness to use of force at the drop of a hat. This is evident in the near-fatal shooting of Tyrus Jones and the brutalization of Denzel Duvant. This is an excerpt from a Rockford Register-Star article written by Chris Green on November 24th, 2020. On October 2nd, Tyrus Jones was wanted on charges of aggravated discharge of a firearm and 2 separate warrants for alleged domestic battery when he was spotted by police in a vehicle. The officer attempted to make a traffic stop, but Jones fled and later crashed his vehicle in the area of South Main Street and Springfield Avenue. Jones exited the damaged vehicle and, according to police, appeared to be armed as he approached another vehicle. That's when McNeese fired 5 shots. Marilyn Height Ross, then state's attorney, said he was legally justified to use of force. He was legally justified to use force he believed was necessary to prevent the escape. In addition, based upon Officer McNeese's observation of the defendant at the time, he reasonably believed that the defendant had a weapon, even though a weapon was not found. So if we was to look at things from a larger point of sense and try to include different things in this, they knew who this man was. They knew who this young man was. It's not like they didn't know and they saw something that was going on and was something dangerous that they needed to stop right now. No, they knew exactly who this young man was. They supposedly they knew who this young man was. They knew they had these warrants out. So supposedly they knew this. So what's the reason to even get in a car chase in the first place if they already know who this man is? Then reasonably believe that the defendant had a weapon even though a weapon was not found. That's a funny way of saying he was unarmed as he was running away. That's a real long way of saying that this young man was unarmed and running away. And what did that mean? Really, it reasonably believed that that the defendant had a weapon, even though a weapon was not found. Really, what that seemed like to me is, and this is showcased in evidence in all other situations of police terrorism. Starting to rain a little bit. Hold on, let me just finish this. After the conclusion of the Winnebago-Boone County Integrity Task Force investigation, McNeese was allowed back to his regular patrol as a scope team member. He never missed a paycheck during this time. Just a little over a month after going back to work, McNeese was involved in yet another case McNeese was involved in the brutalization of Denzel Duvant. On January 5th, 2021, Dominic McNeese, along with other scope team members, were patrolling the fairgrounds area. In the late evening hours, a car drove past that McNeese claims was similar to a car that was involved in a crime a month prior. I never really thought about it from that angle, that this he got cleared to go back to work. Shooting of Tyrus Jones was ruled justified, I believe, November 23rd, November 24th. So this happened on January 5th. So if he's saying that the car that he alleged to have seen involved in a crime a month prior, that means like he must have seen that car the first week or 2 weeks he was back to work. That's what he's saying. Not even really. This happened on January 5th. Okay. McNeese then began to look for the car, and after a short period of time, found it in the parking lot of Fairgrounds housing area. After McNeese got out of the car, they then observed Denzel Duvant walking in their direction. When Denzel realized that he was walking in the direction of police officers, he turned around and began walking in the opposite direction. McNeese never called out to Denzel at any point. McNeese would say in a police report that the reasoning they decided to follow Denzel Duvant was because he looked like he had a warrant. He looked like he had a warrant. He looked like he had a warrant. When Denzel was unable to get into one of the houses, he turned the corner and began to climb a fence. While Denzel was climbing the fence, another police car pulled up to the house and yelled to Denzel, "Stop, motherfucker, police." Denzel immediately got down from the fence and got down on his hands and knees and put his hands up. He then informed the police officers that he did have a warrant. The warrant was a bench warrant for missing a court date for traffic-related offenses. Officers then handcuffed Denzel and put his face down in the snow. So at this point, let's think about where we are at this point. This happened on January 5th. There's snow on the ground. McNeese is saying that he's seen this car involved in a crime a month prior, even though he only been at work for a little over a month. He only been back to work for a little over a month. And they find this car in just a parking lot. They find it in a parking lot. And they see this young man walking in the sidewalk in their direction. And once they see him, once he realizes it's police over there, he turn and walk away. And that's not abnormal. That is not something unusual or something that is really that abnormal. I don't want to really don't nobody want to be where police are. If police are in the area, nobody really wants to be there. So it's not like this is some type of unusual thing, something that don't never happen, that is so unusual and so cause to follow him, cause to search him. And then he gets down. They pull up, they stop. Another car pulls up, they stop. He's on this fence. He gets down, puts his hands up, face, and snow on the ground. They handcuff him. He tells them that he got a warrant. For missing a court date. For traffic-related offenses. It was at that point that several officers, including but not limited to Dominic McNeese, Bryce Davis, Luke Davidson, and Brian Prine, began to punch and kick Denzel Duvant's face and body. Denzel's face was beaten to a near unrecognizable state. The justification they gave for the beating was the allegation that Denzel supposedly bit Luke Davidson, to which Denzel will be charged with aggravated battery to a peace officer and resisting arrest. Not one officer faced any repercussions for their role in this battery. They beat this man because they said he looked like he had a warrant. The next officer we cover is Owen McGinnis. who's been with the Rockford Police Department for 8 years and is currently a scope team member. Date of incidents include July 24th, 2016 and April 11th, 2021. This is an excerpt from a Rockford Register-Star article written by Kristen Zambo on August 22nd, 2017. A Rockford man is suing 2 Rockford police officers contending they used excessive force after arresting him last summer during an argument with his girlfriend. An attorney for Jordan R. Mondragon, 40 years old, filed the lawsuit in U.S. District Court in Rockford. Along with the city, officers Emilio Marquez and Owen McGinnis are named as defendants. The lawsuit states Mondragon was arrested on July 24th, 2016 for allegedly breaking a window screen at his girlfriend's home. Mondragon was handcuffed in Marquez's squad car when the two exchanged words and insults. Marquez pulled Mondragon out of the car and slammed him to the ground. And Owen McGinnis dropped a knee into Mondragon's back, and the 2 officers began kicking and hitting Mondragon in his sides and his face, the lawsuit says. So this type of thing, this type of use of force, this is what happened on a daily basis in this city. We have a situation to where in Rockford, with just the Rockford Police Department alone uses somewhere between 1,500 and 2,000 times per year. They use some type of use of force. So if you was to break that numbers down, somewhere between 3 to 5 times per day, some type of use of force is being used by the Rockford Police Department. Somebody is getting their ass beat 3 to 5 times per day solely just by the Rockford Police Department alone. Violence workers. On April 11th, 2021, Scope Team Officer Owen McGinnis attempted to make a traffic stop around the intersection of South Central and Michigan Avenue. The reasoning for the attempted stop was the allegations that the vehicle may have been involved in incidents previously. So again, this is a situation to where it's very similar to Denzel Duvine. It looked like he had a warrant. It looked like this car may have been involved in incidents previously. Owen McGinnis then saw the car again on Illinois Street. The car had briefly stopped and a passenger of the car exited and ran. McGinnis then exited his vehicle and chased the then unknown individual. The chase went through multiple backyards and over fences. Old McGinnis fired 5 rounds, with one hitting Jose Gonzalez Jr. in the right leg. Jay Hanley, the state's attorney, would state in press conferences that there were no active warrants out for Jose Gonzalez Jr. So again, very similar to the situation regarding Denzel Duvine. It looked like he had a warrant. They had no reason to chase this man. No reason to chase this young man. No reason at all. Passenger in a car chase. He get out the car and he run. Chasing him through backyards, hopping over fences. They had no reason to shoot this man. And this investigation was just recently ruled justified. Owen McGinnis is back to work. Back to work already. Chasing somebody, a passenger, in an attempted traffic stop. And the reason for the traffic stop was that thought that this car may have been involved in incidents previously. No active warrants was out for Jose Gonzalez Jr. At the time that old McGinnis was chasing Jose Gonzalez Jr., he had no idea who he was. Shot him 5 times. Tried to kill him. The next officer we cover is Pete Dalprá. Pete Dalprá has been with the Winnebago County Sheriffs for 23 years, and he is currently a deputy chief of the Winnebago County Sheriff's Department. Date of incidents include June 1st, 2010, February 2005, and the summer of 2020. The culture of impunity is not isolated to the Rockford Police Department. The Winnebago County Sheriff's Department has created an environment that wantonly endangers community members' lives and safety on a regular basis. Sheriff deputies played a large part in the arrest of protesters during the first few weeks of arrest during the city market protests in 2020. Protesters which began in an effort to raise awareness on the heinous actions police officers and sheriff deputies took on May 30th. As deputy chief, Dalprá oversaw as individuals were brutalized by sheriff deputies in the Rockford Police Department. Dalprá personally attacked and grabbed an individual in the so-called designated protest zone and arrested them. Attacked people. So there was a situation. Again, we got some new people. It was a situation last year during City Market. It's what is the park called? Joe Marino Park. They had said it was the city had put out a map of the City Market area, and they put out they colored in where the City Market permit existed, and they colored in a new area which they called the designated protest zone. And in this week, it was multiple young children, teenagers, not even teenagers, preteens. What is that called? Tweener? What is that called? I don't know. 12-year-old, 13-year-old pepper sprayed directly in the face by Winnebago County Sheriff deputies. Multiple people were attacked, chased into this so-called designated protest zone, and beat and slammed to the ground. And it's, again, I'll try to go back and share a video of this if I can, but it's full evidence of all these certain things. Pete Dalprá was also named in a lawsuit that stemmed from an incident in February 2005, in which a mother claimed sheriff deputies falsely arrested her 14-year-old son and forced a confession. The mother of the child would say deputies lied to her about the date her son had court, which led to the boy staying in jail longer. Sheriff deputies allegedly then took the boy to the scene. Sheriff deputies allegedly then took the boy to the scene where a murder had taken place. According to the family's lawyer, deputies fed the boy information and videotaped him acting out the crime. The tape showed the boy giving details of the murder that would later be proven to not be true. In fact, none of the details in the 14-year-old's confession were true. The boy was never involved in the crime, nor had he heard about it until the deputies arrested him. The charges against the boy would later be dropped, but the deputies involved faced no repercussions. So, a 14-year-old kid, how old, where you at? I think you were a freshman. You were a freshman if you were 14 years old. Maybe you were in 8th grade. Where a murder had taken place at a bar close by. And police, and they would arrest this 14-year-old, take him in jail, lie to the mother, lie to her, and say that they'll tell her when the court day is, give her a wrong date and a wrong time to where the boy can't get his bond paid, can't get out of jail, and is forced forced to stay in jail longer. And while he is in jail, they feel the need, for whatever reason, to pin this murder on him. A murder that he was not involved in, a murder that he had no knowledge of. But they took him to the murder scene. Videotaped him acting out a murder. A murder that he had no involvement in. They pressured this young child into this confession. They forced this young child into this confession. On June 1st, 2010, Winnebago County Sheriff deputies, including Peter Duprat, were deployed to a residence in Roscoe for a wellness check. Right there, we gotta stop and think, it's a wellness check. Police officers do not need to respond, do not need to be involved in, do not need to take any part in wellness checks. They're very hypocritical for police officers to respond to wellness checks. Upon their arrival, they encountered Alexander Wasson, a distraught 58-year-old high school teacher. Deputies then engaged in an hours-long standoff with Wasson, who was locked inside his home by himself. This is a wellness check. A wellness check, they're engaging in this standoff. For a wellness check, he's at home by himself, distraught. 58-year-old high school teacher. The standoff finally ended when Duprat, along with other deputies, invaded the household. Once inside, deputies found Wasson in the basement of the house. Wasson initially, and again, he in the home by himself, is only police officers that can testify as to what happened. Wasson initially went peacefully with the deputies, but it is alleged that he picked up his gun, which led to Pete Duprat shooting Wasson. And this is really unclear. Alexander Wasson, they would say that he would survive the shooting, but then he would pass away a month later. So I'm not sure. There is a little bit of gray area if he died as a result of the shooting or if he died due to other manner. Is unclear at this point. But either way, he passed away a month after he was shot. And we got one more officer. Joseph Brulard, who's been with the Winnebago County Sheriff's Department for 14 years, and at this time he was a detective. And the date of incident includes December 7th, 2012, and April 10th, 2021. Joseph Brulard is just another example of a police officer that has been allowed, encouraged, and justified in his multiple incidences of using force. This is an excerpt from Rockford Register article written by Greg Stanley on December 24th, 2012. Craig Clark of Orangeville was struck with a taser and arrested outside a Pecatonica Tavern in December 2010. Clark claims in a federal lawsuit filed December 7th that the officers had no cause to arrest him. He and a friend had left the bar in a car and were immediately pulled over by Winnebago County Sheriff Deputy Joseph Brulard. And this is a thing that happened regularly in Rockford, where police officers will be stationed out next to bars, pulling people over as they leave bars, trying to arrest somebody, trying to get somebody on a DUI, trying to put somebody in jail. Entrapment, really. Clark's friend was a driver, according to the complaint. Brulard asked the two for identification while he ran a background check. Clark Okay. Okay, my fault. I'm trying to read this article. Clark's friend was a driver, according to the complaint. Boulard asked the two for identification while he ran a background check. Clark walked back into the bar. Pecatonica police officer Douglas, trying to think about how to say his name, Douglas Hendriskin, arrived as backup. When Boulard gave the driver a field sobriety test, Clark yelled from the porch of the bar that his friend could refuse the test. And this is true. This is factual, that you can refuse to take a sobriety test. What may happen, I would think that you most likely are going to go to jail anyway, but you can refuse, and I would think you probably should refuse to take the field sobriety test. Okay. After he yelled, Hendriskin pointed his taser at Clark and told him he was under arrest, according to the lawsuit. Clark would... it's not... it's one of the things that you can just do. Nothing you can do but laugh. Okay. After he yelled, Hendriskin pointed his taser at Clark and told him he was under arrest. Clark said, "Really?" I don't know. Ain't nothing you can do but laugh at that. My fault. Hold on, let me make sure. Okay. Hendriskin fired his taser and hit Clark more than 10 times with a baton, Clark said in his complaint. During the arrest, Hendriskin lost his taser. The officers claim Clark took it. Clark claims that Hendriskin dropped it. And I would think it would be very hard to hold on to this taser after you tasing him and you beating somebody with a baton. You hitting somebody with this baton. According to Clark, Boulard then punched him in the face and struck him with an elbow. And Hendriskin regained the taser. He used it again on Clark and handcuffed him. All for saying that somebody could refuse a field sobriety test. That's what this stemmed from saying that, hey, you don't have to take that test. That's what this stemmed from. Beating somebody, tasing somebody twice, beating them with a baton, punching and kicking them in the face. For somebody saying that you can refuse to take field sobriety test. In the morning hours of April 10th, 2021, a domestic call was made from a Casey's gas station. Winnebago County sheriffs responded to the call and spoke to the individual who made the call. The individual who would say she had gotten into an argument with her husband that turned physical. After speaking with the victim, Winnebago County Sheriff's deputies went to the residence where the victim and her husband, Faustin Guaitigo, lived. Faustin was a refugee from Central African Republic who had only been in the United States for a few years. The deputies would leave the household once they were unable to locate Faustin. Another 911 call was made at 5:45 in the evening that same day. Sheriffs would again respond to the scene where they found Faustin Guaitigo on the street in front of the residence they were initially called to. A sheriff confronted Faustin outside the home, repeatedly putting his hands on Faustin's chest and grabbing Faustin's arm. The deputy would approach Faustin with his taser out, which led to Faustin asking, "Why do you have your gun out?" Faustin would eventually go back inside his home, and the deputy would call for backup. As deputies arrived, they began to coerce the wife of Faustin to give them a key to the home. Once the key was obtained, Deputies would enter the home with a. Once the key was obtained, deputies would enter the home with the lead deputy carrying a taser going in first. The deputy carrying the taser would pass the door to the basement, which led to Brulard, who had his gun drawn, opening it. Upon opening it, Brulard would see Faustin at the bottom of the stairs with a pipe in his hand. Deputies would yell, "Drop it!" But Faustin would continue to climb the stairs. When he was about halfway, Brulard began to fire his gun. Despite being... My fault. When he was about halfway, Brulard began to fire his gun. Despite being shot already, Faustin would reach the top of the stairs. There is an allegation that Faustin swung the pipe and knocked Brulard unconscious. This allegation is not caught on any of the body cameras worn by any of the deputies. What is clear and caught on camera is Brulard shooting Faustin 9 times, then Faustin falling into Brulard, causing them both to fall. And it's hard to watch. It's a difficult video to watch. But if you do watch the video, if you have watched the video, you can see after they both fall to the ground that there is a dent in that door. It's a dent in there, which I believe is from Brulard hitting his head on the way down. And this so-called injury that he had, I believe, it is my opinion, that injury comes from him falling to the ground after shooting this man 9 times. Then, after being shot 9 times, the lead deputy who came in first fired his taser in the direction of both Faustin and Brulard. Deputy Gabriel Eaton would fire 2 shots through the screen door as they were laid out on the ground. After Faustin had been shot 9 times, after he had already been tased, Eaton would shoot from outside through the screen door. He would shoot twice. The immediate action from the officers was to call for care for Brulard and put Faustin Guetigo in handcuffs, while shouting, "Stop resisting!" Brulard and Eaton would be placed on paid administrative leave while they both awaited the findings of the Winnebago-Boone County Integrity Task Force. And they ended up being ruled justified. And they both got to go back to work. So again, this is specific to 8 officers and specific to some of the incidents that they were involved in. But again, use of force is used on a daily basis in this city. Don't let nobody lie to you and say that this isn't a problem in Rockford. It's an entire culture inside the Rockford Police Department, inside the Winnebago County Sheriff's Department, inside the Loves Park Police Department that necessitates the use of force, that requires the use of force, and fosters the use of deadly force. Police officers it's been more police officers who have gotten awards for their role in shootings, for their role in murders, for their role in beatings. They've gotten awarded for these actions than have gotten fired or faced any negative repercussions. So again, today, I think that on October 11th, I think it's important to think about Logan Bell during this day, who was murdered by Jeremiah Suzerli, who Jeremiah Suzerli is still working. He regularly worked City Market. It is seen. It's a video. Actually, Jeremiah Suzerli, he the first person that arrested me. On August 7th of last year, he the first person that arrested me for walking in the crosswalk. And the week before that, it's a video. My fault. It is on video, but the picture where Dana screaming, Jeremiah Suzerli, he the cop in the middle of that picture. I'll try to see if I can post that picture as well. But he the cop in the middle. He had shot and killed Logan Bell, shot that young man along with Philip Styler 16 times. So this situation, where it's not a situation to where firing these 8 cops or firing Carla Red or any sort of reform will eradicate the overall system and culture of impunity that is embedded in the Rockford Police Department, that these police institutions were founded on. There is no way that you can get rid of police using force, using deadly force, and still have the Rockford Police Department. Those two, they're synonymous. You can't talk about the Rockford Police Department without talking about the daily use of force that is used. You can't talk about the Rockford Police Department without talking about the shootings that occur each and every year. You can't talk about the Winnebago County Sheriff's Department without talking about their abuses throughout this whole county. This has been day 375. Again, we have copies of the history of the Winnebago Boone County Integrity Task Force, as well as the Culture and Impunity pamphlet. Subscribe to the newsletter. Newsletter went out, I think, a little after 1 today. Subscribe to the podcast, the Social Construct of Leslie podcast. Should new episode premiering Thursday, I believe. Episode 1 is out now. Day 374. The struggle continues.